welcome to our beautiful session today. We are very excited, especially me, because
I hope I'll fulfill your expectations.
Oh, I no doubt about it. No doubt about it. So since this is now online, we are recording. We have good amount of participants. So welcome, Dr. Suhail Anwar, to our session. So basically, this is Al-Mawrid Canada, the youth adult discussion chapter that we have started, and this would be one of our nicely organized stuff that we want our young adults to listen to and perhaps get some ideas and open up our minds. और ये उर्दू में भी हो सकता है, इंग्लिश में भी होगा. डॉक्टर सुहेल हमारे साथ हैं. डॉक्टर सुहेल को आप जानते हैं कि ये लिखते भी हैं और यूट्यूबर भी हैं, टिकटॉकर भी हैं और सर्जन भी हैं. Oh, that's amazing. He also writes in newspapers, especially about ethics, morality. अगर आप इनको YouTube और TikTok देखें तो it's all about Islahiyat. It's like how to make yourself better. So that's very interesting, Dr. Suhail, and we are glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us.
So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First of all, thank you very much to Al-Mawrid Canada for giving me this opportunity to present this. I'm very honored and very privileged that the Al-Mawrid Canada has given me this platform. My profound gratitude to Dr. Yasin and Mr. Shan Sheikh from Canada for organizing this, Najia Nazir from Saudi Arabia for helping me to facilitate it, Sher Bano from Pakistan for helping me out with it, and Dr. Farooq Bhatt Saab from UK for organizing this talk. The topic of this talk is the basis of ethics and morality, whether it's religious or secular. So we would be discussing where is our morality coming from? Is it grounded in religious dictums or is it grounded in secular, atheistic, liberal values? Now, I want to clarify that my question is not that do I need God or religion to be a good person? That's not what my contention is, that whether we need God or religion to be a good person. I know a lot of people, some of them are very good friends who are atheists or agnostics, or they don't believe in God or religion, but they're very, very good people. So the question is, the answer to this question is not that we need religion to be a good person. We already know that we all know very good people who are not religious people. So this is not my contention, and this is not my proposition. My proposition is that so the argument is not that we have to believe in God to have moral values. That's not my argument, and that's not my contention. My argument is that if the argument is that we need to have God as an objective, transcendent value that move beyond human etiquettes. Because I believe, or my proposition is, that take out God out of objective morality, then the morals just become mere human etiquettes. Like opening a door for someone, like holding the fork in your right hand and spoon or knife in your left hand, like saying thank you when someone holds the door open for you. These are mere human etiquettes. What makes them moral values is the objectivity of the God. So we need to have a transcendent being to objectify our moral values. So that's what my contention or proposition for today is. Remember again, the topic for today is what is the basis of ethics and morality? Where does the ethics and morals come from? Do they come from a religious source or a secular source? Yasin Saab, if at any point you want to stop me to clarify any issues, any things, please feel free to stop me.
Thank you so much. Please carry on.
Thank you. So what is this talk about? First of all, a couple of disclaimers. Whatever I'll say today are my own views. I'm not representing an ideology, a sect, a person. These are my own personal views about religious and morality. My second disclaimer is that I am a surgeon, a medical doctor by profession. I have no formal training in philosophy. I haven't done a degree in philosophy. I'm self-taught. I have an interest in theology and philosophy and cosmology and evolution, but from a theological point of view. This is a philosophical talk. Philosophy can be quite boring, but I'll encourage the young people in the audience to study philosophy. Philosophy has got many branches, and one of the branches that everybody should know about is logic. The other branches are epistemology, metaphysics, and ethics. We won't be talking about metaphysics today. We won't be talking about logic today. We won't be talking about epistemology. We'll be talking about metaethics today. But I'll encourage all the people in the audience, because philosophy helps you think about things. It helps you with interfaith dialogue, because you can exactly know why the other person is saying what they're saying, and you can pick up their arguments. You can posit your arguments with a confidence. You can decipher their arguments with a confidence, and you will exactly know what it is about. Now, I'm not trying to change anybody's points of view. The purpose of this talk is just to basically present my own views. People are welcome to think or stick to their point of views. The idea of this talk is to throw out some propositions, some ideas. People can think about them, toy with the notions, and give me some feedback. I'm a student like everybody else. I'm not a teacher. I'm not here to judge anybody. I leave the judgment up to Allah. So the talk will go, I'll give a brief history of morality first. Then we will talk about some definitions and terminology, because definitions and terminology around metaethics are very confusing. And like all discussions, if we don't have standardized definitions, then you are saying something and I'm understanding something else, because we are not coming from the same place. So I'm going to clarify the definition and terminology. This is the most boring part of metaethics. So when we get to this part, I recommend you grab your coffees, because some of you might be going to sleep at this point, but I'll try to make it easy, succinct, and summarize it as much as possible. So then we can get on to the next part. Then I'll home it down to what is subjective and objective morality. And from there, I will derive the secular and religious morality, which is the meat of my talk. But hopefully, by dwindling down and homing in to the secular and religious morality, I will eventually get there. The talk hopefully would be about 1 hour. I might slightly go over 1 hour. Now, 1 hour is a long time, because the normal human span is about 5 minutes. So I've got a big task at hand, because morality is a subject where people have spent their whole lifetimes writing books on and talking about. Even certain small aspects of morality people have spent their whole life talking about. So it's a big task to summarize this in 1 hour, but I'll try to do my best. Now, like everything else, let's get the definition first. Ethics are the moral principles that govern a person's behavior or conduct. How should we behave? What is right? What is wrong? What shall we do? If we see a child being tortured, shall we go and intervene? If we see a person being abused, shall we go and intervene? What is our job? What are our duties to our family, to our children, to our parents? Ethics and morality deal with all that. John Dee, in his book Introduction to Ethics, said that the standards of right and wise conduct, whose authority in practical thought is determined by reason rather than custom. So this is the definition of ethics and morality according to John Dee. Now remember, the key word here is reason. And this is what I'll be talking about. Where does this reason come from? If we are using reason to determine the standards of right and wise conduct, where is this reason coming from? Is this rationality? Are we thinking about this reason? Is this instinct? Has this reason been bestowed into us or upon us by Allah? Or is it just our aql, our intellect, that help us think about this reason? And then we use this reason to determine the standards of right and wise conduct. So the reason will tell us what is right and what is wrong, but I will try to talk about where this reason is coming from. Now, ethics and morality are used interchangeably, and that's because basically both the words have got their roots in Greek and Latin, and that's why they are used interchangeably. There are subtle differences, but for the purposes of my talk, I'll use ethics and morality interchangeably. Einstein is my personal hero. Einstein said, "I do not believe in immortality of the individual, and I consider ethics to be an exclusively human concern with no superhuman authority behind it." Einstein did not think that we need a superhuman God to have ethics or morality. We do not need to be a good person. We do not need a God to be a good person. But are these views about morality started from Einstein? No. I'll just briefly give you a history of morality. History of morality is saying history of eating or history of sleeping, because, you know, since time immemorial, since recorded history, morality in some shape or form has always been there. But just to briefly talk about the history of morality, remember, ethics or morality is a reason-guided study of what we ought to do. These are very important words, what we ought to do, because I'll come to David Hume's is or dilemma later on in my talk. But remember what we ought to do. If you see someone being abused, what do we ought to do? If my child is suffering, what do I ought to do? Do I need to alleviate their suffering, or do I let them suffer? If I see a baby being tortured, what do I ought to do? If I see someone taking a bribe, what do I ought to do? If I see an abortion clinic, what do I ought to do? Do I ought to bomb it, or do I ought to go and stand and protect it? If I see the rights of women being obliterated, what do I ought to do? So morality deals with what do we ought to do in our personal life, in our family life, in our life as a religious person, as a person belonging to a sect, an ideology, a country, and the whole world. Again, the word reason I've mentioned, you know, where is this reason coming from? Ethics is a reason-guided study. Where is this reason coming from? Are we figuring out this reason? Is it come to us by evolution, by 5,000 history of us being transformed from apes to humans? During that time, we have developed this reason. Or does that reason come from Allah? Is it an instinctual? Is it our intuition? Is it intuitive, this reason? So that is what we'll be discussing today. Now, like everything else, we go back to the Greeks. Socrates was the first moral philosophers. There were some pre-Socratic philosophers like Homer. Some of you might have read Homer's work, the Iliad and the Odyssey, in which he rejects religion in favor of science. Socrates, however, said that morality comes from God. The view that morality comes from God has got a deep problem. Citing God as your source for moral authority doesn't give us the authoritative ground we might think. Moral responsibility falls to the free rational agent. So Socrates thought that morality depends on a free rational agent, which is us. So we are responsible for our morality. We think of morality. We give birth to morality. We participate and stick to our moral values, nothing to do with a God. Aristotle, who was obviously Plato's student, who was Socrates' student in turn, Aristotle had a few different views about this. The Aristotelian ethics believe in telos. The word telos means a purpose. So everything, according to Aristotle, has got a purpose. The knife has got a purpose, it cuts. The boat has got a purpose, it floats. What is the purpose of a person? In his book, The Nicomachean Ethics, Nicomachus was Aristotle's son, and his treatise, The Nicomachean Ethics, 10 books, he named after his son Aristotle. He said that our telos is a state of eudaimonia. Eudaimonia means a state of happiness, a state of flourishing, not only for a person. Excuse me for 1 second, get my notes up. There we are. So eudaimonia is a state of happiness, just not only for a person, but for a whole society. Aristotle famously said, one swallow doesn't make a summer. Now you would be forgiven to think this was said by Shakespeare, but it's not. It's said by Aristotle. One swallow doesn't make a summer means that one good act or one good thing doesn't make a whole life nice. To make your whole life nice and the life of people around you nice, you have to be in a state of eudaimonia. That is what Aristotle's philosophy was. He believed and developed virtue ethics. Virtue ethics are very close to Islamic ethics as well. The Quran talks about them, and we'll talk about it at a later state. But Aristotle developed this state. Sorry, there's a typo there. Apologies for that. Need to develop virtue ethics to reach a state, not stay, to reach a state of eudaimonia. So that's what Aristotle talked about. So what are Aristotle's virtues? Courage, liberality, magnificence, magnanimity, proper ambition, truthfulness, wittiness, friendliness, modesty, righteous indignation. These are Aristotle's virtue ethics. You need to stick to these things to be a good person, to create a state of eudaimonia, flourishing of the whole human race, and you flourish together. Now, Aristotle was a rationalist. He believed in reason, and his teachings doesn't involve God very much in his virtue ethics either. Now, while this was happening on the Greek side, this is Hellenistic philosophy. So Hellenistic philosophy essentially means the Greek philosophy. So after Aristotle, there were the Stoics, the Epicureans, and other Greek philosophers. So there were the pre-Socrates, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and there were the post-Aristotelian philosophy. But obviously that is not our topic, that's a discussion for some other time. So I'm just giving you a brief history before I get to the main meat of the talk. So while this was happening on the Greek side, what was happening in the Middle East? The first monotheistic religion, as we know that Hinduism is one of the oldest religion. Then we've got the Zoroastrianism. But the first organized religion is Judaism. What does Judaism say about morality? The answer is very simple, the 10 commandments. The most simple, I mean, there are more than 120 commandments, but the 10 commandments are the most famous morality-based commandments of the Jewish religion. Now, the problem with the morality in the Jewish religion and the criticism of the atheist secular person on this is, you know that Bible has got 27 books in the New Testament and 39 books in the Old Testament. In the Protestant faith, there are 6 more books. But the 39 books of the Old Testament are based on the 24 books of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is the actual Bible that Jews believe, because the Jews don't believe in the Christian Bible, which is the New Testament and the Old Testament. So the Hebrew Bible has got 24 books. It's divided into, and this is very briefly, I mean, I'm not here for comparative religious studies, but very briefly, and you'll know why I'm saying all this. Very briefly, the Hebrew Bible is divided into 3 things: the Tanakh, or the Pentateuch, the Catechism, which are the prophets like Joshua and Judges, and the Nevi'im, which are the prophets like the Joshua and Judges, and Catechism, which is the writings like Ruth, for example, the book of Ecclesiastes, Psalms, and you know, all these books are in the Catechism. The first 5 books, which is called the Pentateuch or the Tanakh, are and I'm sure these are the most common books, so most people have heard about it, are the Genesis, the Exodus, Numbers, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. Now, the God of the Tanakh or the Hebrew Bible or the Torah or the Torah is a very violent God. This God has condoned a lot of violence, despite on one hand that he condones the 10 commandments. For example, in Numbers, Moses tell his followers to go and destroy Midianites, which was another tribe in the Arabian land. So go and destroy Midianites, kill their men, kill their children, kill their women, kill all the women who had sexual relations with men, but only keep alive virgins. There's another command in Deuteronomy. Moses commands many of his tribes and followers to go and kill people in other tribes to spread Judaism. There are many other verses, and like I said, this is not my topic, and that is the problem, because the God of the Torah or the Hebrew Bible is a violent God, and that is the objection from the secular. Now, moving forward 200 years, 500 years, we come to the God, the Christian God. The Christian God is a kinder God than the Jewish God. The Christian God has got a very mellow tone, and there are exceptions to this. For example, the last book of the Bible, the Revelation is called, is a very violent book. But nonetheless, generally, the Christian God is a very kind God. As you know, as I've told you, the New Testament, the Bible has got the Old Testament and the New Testament. The New Testament has got 4 books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And it has got, the book of Acts and the book of Revelation. And there are 13 letters from Paul. These are called the Pauline epistles. Out of those 13 letters, 6 are confirmed forgeries. They're written by something else, but they're given the name of Paul. But 7 are confirmed letters from Paul. And these letters from Paul were written before Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So they were written before the original Gospels. Now, the problem with the morality of the Christianity is the concept of original sin. So original sin, the concept of original sin, which is in complete contradiction to Islam, original sin said in Genesis, which is part of the Old Testament, that when Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden tree, they were punished. They committed a sin. So from birth, they led to a concept of death. This is the concept from birth to death in the original sin, because they committed a sin. Then Jesus came, and Jesus was resurrected. Jesus was crucifixed. He was crucified. This concept is called the vicarious atonement in Christianity. So Jesus was crucified for our sins. And because Jesus was crucified, he has taken care of our sins. So for example, in Romans 3, 21, 26, we are forgiven for our past. Romans, these are the letters from Paul. Romans 8, 14, 19, we are reconciled now with God through God's adoption of us in Christ. Romans 5, 3, 5, we are given the hope of future progress and holiness by the work of Holy Spirit. So these letters from Paul told us that Jesus, through vicarious atonement, has taken care of our sins. When Christian children are born, they are baptized, because Jesus was baptized by John. So Christian children and mainly Catholics and Protestants are baptized. When they are baptized, they are washed. Their original sin was washed. So Christians believe that children are born with original sin. Islam believes that children are born on the ethos of khair. We are born with goodness. Whereas according to Christian theology, we are born with the sin, we are baptized, and Jesus, through his crucifixion, took care of our sins. Moving forward 500 years, no talk on morality is complete without the mention of the Mutazalis and the Asharis. Mutazalis and Asharis are Islamic theology schools in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th centuries. They have long writings on theology and morality. I'm not going to go into it. It's not my topic. It's topic for another day. But in summary, Mutazalis believe in rationality. They said that the wrongful act as one that deserves blame and holds that the right and wrong character of acts is known immediately to human reason, independently of revelation. So Mutazalis are Muslim. Obviously, they're Sunni Muslims. They believe in God, they believe in Quran, but they said revelation plays an important, reason plays an important part. Mutazalis were very impressed by the Aristotelian philosophy. Asharis, on the other hand, they insisted that God is subject to none and to no standard that can fix bounds for him. Nothing can be wrong for God, who set the standard of right and wrong. If God declares that lying to be right, then lying is right. If he says lying is wrong, then lying is wrong. So that was the Ashari theology of thought. This Ash'ari theology came from obviously Ibn Ash'ari. The Mutazali philosophy was from the Mutazali school of thought. So this is in very short how Islamic theologies have derived. This is Sunni Islam. In Shia Islam, you've got Akhbaris and then you've got the Asulis. Akhbaris in Shia theology are the same as the Asharis, and these are all branches of 12er Shias. So Akhbaris like Asharis say that reason doesn't pay any part in morality, whereas the Asulis like Mutazalis say that reason is an important part in judging morality. Fast forward 1200 years, another 200 years. So now we are in the 13th century. In comes Thomas Aquinas. Thomas Aquinas is a big church father, very influenced by Saint Augustine of Hippo. Thomas Aquinas is famous for his arguments for the existence of God. 5 arguments, which we are not discussing today. This is a topic for another day. Thomas Aquinas tried to conflate or join together Aristotelian eudaimonism with Christian theology. Thomas said that humans have innate powers to understand good and bad, and it comes from God. So although Thomas Aquinas believed in eudaimonium and virtue ethics, he said all our ethics and our powers are instinctual. They come from God. His book, The Summa Theology, is a huge treatise on morality. Some beautiful words, I'll read them out. And so the will naturally tends towards its own last end. To every man naturally wills beatitude. Beatitude means connection with God, the supernatural being. And from this natural willing are caused all other willings, since whatever a man wills, he wills on account of the end. So Thomas Aquinas said that our goodness and badness is in us, but we need God to tell us how to exercise it. We need God as an objective moral value. So Thomas Aquinas said that the human flourishing or the well-being and happiness and the character traits, which is virtue ethics, and the knowledge given to us by God, the instinctual knowledge, this is the whole ethos of morality according to Thomas Aquinas. Human beings inherently are born with morality and consciousness. Free will make us our choices, our behavior depends on that. We distinguish between right and wrong and evil and good. The primary percepts, the basic goods, is life, reproduction, education, worship of the God, social life. We shun ignorance and we avoid offense. This theology of Thomas Aquinas is very close to Islamic theology. As a matter of fact, the Farai school of thought, if you listen to Ghamidi Saab's talks and you read his things on fitra, the human fitra, I will recommend people who are interested in it to go to the 23 objections of Ghamidi Saab, pick up the 7 lectures on fitra, which are philosophical lectures, in my opinion. They are very close to this ethos of Thomas Aquinas. Remember, I've now introduced a new word here. Previously, I've introduced reason. Now, I'm introducing the word inherent in here. Inherent means that we are bestowed, and I'll make my case in point afterwards, but during my talk. But inherent means that we are bestowed. It is our fitra to have morality. In Quran 30:30, so direct your face toward the religion, inclining to truth. Adhere to the fitrah of Allah, upon which He has created all people. So we are all created on a fitrah. We have inherent morality. Ghamidi Saab would always say we are born with 2 things. We are born with the concept of wahdaniyat, a belief in a supernatural Allah, a supernatural deity, and we are born with the concept of morality. We can differentiate between good and bad at the time of our birth, which is what Aquinas has shown. Aquinas was a Christian. He was very impressed by St. Augustine, who was born in 380, Augustine of Hippo. So Aquinas believed in the original sin as well, which obviously we don't. Move forward, we come to the modern philosophy. Now, there's a lot of modern philosophers, another time, another talk. They are basically, you can divide them in the rationalist and the empiricist. Rationalists believe in the a priori rational of knowledge. A priori rational of knowledge means that we can use inductive and deductive reasoning to discern morality. Whereas the empiricists like Locke, Berkeley, David Hume, they believed in using our senses to figure out morality. This concept is very close, and I'll come to it, with the secular modern philosophy and secular modern atheistic morality, the empiricist morality, where the rational, like Kant, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, they believed in faculty of the human mind, although they didn't believe in God, but they believe in the faculty of the human mind. Now, let's get, so now that the history, I've given you a little bit of flavor, I will stop at this point for 1 second and see if there are any questions, Yasin, from any burning questions from any of the audience.
So far, we have no raised hands.
No raised hand? Okay.
Yep.
So, yeah,
it looks like things are going very smoothly.
Thank you.
Nicely done. Thank
you. So now let's get to the classification part. So this is the part where you guys go and get your coffees because there's confusing. So I've tried to summarize it and make it easier for you. We are talking about metaethics today. Metaethics is the foundation of morality. It is a study of moral language. It analyzes moral properties. Only by understanding metaethics, we can understand morality. Normative ethics is, how we ought to behave, and I've talked about it. Descriptive ethics are when the ethics are described. So forget normative and descriptive. Let's concentrate on metaethics. So these are the different types: cognitive, non-cognitivism, error theory, moral realism, subjectivism, objectivism. It's very confusing, but I put it out there for you guys to see it, and I'll try to summarize it and concentrate on the parts that I want to concentrate on. Again, this is how philosophers look at metaethics, and this is a simplified version, believe you me. Now, I want to concentrate on a few definitions. So I want you to think about objective and subjective morality. Subjective morality, as the name suggests, is subjective to us. What is moral to me? What is ethical to me? And objective morality is transcendent of human rational reason. So let's say if of the 9 billion people on the planet Earth, all 9 billion people disappear, murder would still be wrong. It is objective. It is the objective truth. If 9 billion people from the Earth disappear, rape would still be wrong. Torturing infants would still be wrong. This is called the objective morality. The subjective morality is subject to a person. The problem with subjective morality is it depends on the personal choices. It depends on the time, ideology, religion, country, civilization, era, geography. In one part of the world, arranged marriages are acceptable. In some other parts, they're looked down upon. Eskimos, up to recently, used to kill their female children. Infanticide, the rasam of sati in India, where the wives used to kill themselves after the husband was dead, was okay for a certain time because it was subjective morality. Similarly, slavery. At one point in human civilization, slavery was okay, but it's not okay now. Similarly, living together, sex outside of the marriage. Similarly, abortion, the issues of abortion. So this is all subjective morality. Now the atheist, the agnostic, the secular liberal was lean a lot towards subjective morality. Why? Because Western, especially Western liberalism, is based on freedom. You have to be free to do what you want to do. As long as it's not harming anybody, you are free to do what you want to do. Your morality is subjective to you as long as you're not harming anybody. Now, this is a generalized statement. Many of the atheists believe in objective morality as well. The problem is they can't ground it. They cannot tell what is the source of objective morality, where it is coming from. Now, this is a simplified chart of morality, subjective and objective, as I explained. Subjective moral claims express facts about someone's opinion, not about things in the real world. Objective moral facts claim express facts about things in the real world, not just opinion. Forget about the relativism and nihilism and divine command theory for a second. Let's stick to the subjective and objective morality. Now, I just want you to glance over this. These are the 5 basic moral theories. The divine command theory, that morality comes from God. The natural law theory, that morality comes from natural laws. We use our common sense. Why do we need God to give us morality? I can use my common sense. I know murder is wrong. I know rape is wrong. Why do I need God to tell me that? Virtue ethics, I've discussed. This is from, these are the character traits of a person. Utilitarianism. Now, the natural law theory and the utilitarianism are the main ethical theories of the atheist agnostic person. Let's move forward from here. So even if I summarize it further, ethical theories are deontology and teleological theories. Deontology will tell you, this is based on God, that right and wrong are based in the action themselves. And action is right and wrong regardless of what we think about it. So this is called a non-consequentialist theory. It means that the consequences of your action does not determine the morality of your action. Whereas the teleological theory, which is a subjective morality, is a consequentialist ethical theory. So your consequences will determine whether your action is right or wrong. This is a subjective, utilitarian, secular, liberal morality. As long as the consequences are good, you're not doing any harm to anybody, then your morality is allowed. So teleological ethics, forget the ethical egoism and the eudaimonism. Let's stick to utilitarianism. Now, utilitarianism is the primary secular, free society, liberal, ethical value. The utilitarian will tell you that moral values should be based on the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It will tell you that as long as an action cause pleasure. So the 2 primary criteria for the utilitarian theory is pleasure and pain. So actions that increase your pleasure are moral actions. Actions that reduce your pleasure or increase your pain are immoral actions. Now, when they say pleasure, don't take it wrong. It doesn't mean pleasure as in having sex or alcohol or drugs or booze. It's not. Pleasure means greatest good for the greatest number of people. Now, the problem with utilitarian society is, utilitarian ethos doesn't sit good with minorities, with disabled people, with people who live in isolation, with people of small sects, because utilitarian society will always think of greatest. So let's say you have an abortion clinic in which you have decided to abort fetuses with Down syndrome, because fetuses or children born with Down syndrome are a burden to society. In a society where utilitarian principles are practiced, they would not cause the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Let's say you're in a Western society and you feel that going and bombing a small country like Libya will cause the greatest good to the greatest number of people because it will eliminate terrorism, then that ethical theory is okay with you. You can go and bomb and destroy a small country to save the rest of the world. And that is a utilitarian principle of a secular, free, agnostic, atheistic world, because your actions, as long as they're causing pleasure and they're not doing anybody any harm, that those actions are okay in a utilitarian society. Now, this is a brief slide. No talk on morality can go without Kantism. Immanuel Kant is one of the greatest philosophers who talk about moral philosophy. Kant's moral philosophy is absolute morality. So Kant talk about categorical imperative. He's got two formulations, and this is not the topic of the day, for some other day, formulation 1 and formulation 2. And Kant will tell you that in no circumstances an immoral action is allowed. So if you are in your house, someone comes to kill you, your wife opens the door, and that man, that assassin says to your wife, is your husband at home? And your wife knows very well that he's killed to come you. She is not allowed to lie. Under no circumstances, lying, cheating, murder, any kind of misbehavior is allowed according to Kantian philosophy, according to the first formulation of his categorical imperative. Second formulation is a little bit in detail, and that's not the topic of the day today. So let's stick to the let's stick to the utilitarian society, because that's what we are talking about in terms of a subjective morality. So what is social Darwinism? Social Darwinism is Darwin, in his book, in his treatise, The Descent of Man, said that, sorry, this is, go back. He said that we have made asylums for the imbecile, the maimed, and the sick. So Darwin, when he went on his journey to the Galapagos Island, where he saw those birds with the strong and the weak beaks, he took some books with him. One of the books was from Thomas Malthus. Thomas Malthus was an economist who believed that the food supply can sometime, the population can sometime outstrip the food supply. And he believed in rationing the food supply to only people who are fit to have food and ration. This is the view that's propagated by, in The Descent of Man, in his actual book, Darwin has written that. Herbert Spencer, who's an English polymath and a sociologist who actually coined the term survival of the fittest, he said, a very big proponent of utilitarian philosophy he said that a social system that provides for the poor and needy is eventually detrimental to the overall growth of a society, as it promotes the survival of the weak and the infirm, leading to an overall retardation of growth. And that is the concept of a utilitarian, subjective morality society. This concept was led to eugenics. Many of you would know what eugenics is. Eugenics means eliminate the disabled. There were in the 19th, 18th, 19th century, there were American and British eugenic societies. Sterilization, forced abortion, rationing of education was common in European societies. Big names, Theodore Roosevelt, Winston Churchill, Alexander Graham Bell. These are big names who believed in eugenics. Eugenics was taught in European schools. Up to 1970s, females were forcibly sterilized. In Sweden, up to 2010, female prisoners were forcibly sterilized in the jails, in the prisons of US on the basis of eugenics. Let's eliminate everybody who is disabled because they don't cause the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Darwin, Richard Dawkins, most of you have heard about him. He's he is a famous atheistic writer. As a matter of fact, two books that have done religion the most harm in the recent period is a book by Darwin called The Blind Watchmaker, and the second one is a book by Stephen Hawking called A Brief History of the World. These two books have really shook the religion at their foundation. Richard Dawkins once said, "It is one thing to deplore eugenics on ideological, political, moral grounds, but it's quite another to conclude that it wouldn't work in practice. Of course it would work. It works for cows, horses, pigs, dogs, and roses. Why on earth wouldn't it work for humans? Facts ignore ideology." So when you're coming at morality from an atheistic point of view, this is what your view is, because you are looking at people as animals, as just a species that can be eliminated on the grounds of a utilitarian philosophy. Just forget this slide about ontology and epistemology. Now, Darwin, in his book, now, the next few slides, I want to make a point of what is the problem with the atheist. atheist. The atheist can turn around and say, yes, I don't need God. Or a secular liberal can turn around, I don't need God. I know what is right and wrong. I know what murder is. I know what rape is. Why do I need a God? But the problem is the atheist cannot have his cake and eat it as well. Why? Let's have a look at the next few slides. Darwin, in his famous book, The Descent of Man, which I've already mentioned, said that if we take an extreme case, men were reared under precisely the same conditions and as hive bees, there can hardly be a doubt that our unmarried females would, like the worker bees, think it is a sacred duty to kill their brothers, mothers, and strive to kill their fertile daughters, and no one would think of interfering. Because Darwin doesn't differentiate humans from animals, he just thinks that our morality depends on how we were raised, in the circumstances and areas that we are raised. So if we are raised like bees, and you know all very well that worker bees kill the queen bee sometime, and the queen bee kill the worker bee sometime. So Darwin said that if we were raised in circumstances such as bees, we would be doing the same thing. We would have no morality. Why? Because Dawkins said that the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. This is what Dawkins said. If this is not a nihilistic argument, then what is nihilism then, I ask you? So Dawkins said that the universe we are living in is a blind, pitiless universe. We are mere animals. We are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes. So that's all we do. We are here to propagate our gene. And if you look at this morality, Dawkins said that rape is wrong is as arbitrary as we have 5 digits rather than 6. So he said that the more moral ground that rape is wrong, there's no moral grounds to it. It's just arbitrary. That's what Dawkins said. Lawrence Krauss, who is a famous astrophysicist, a big speaker for the atheist, he was once having a debate with Hamza Zortzis. Hamza Zortzis is an Islamic philosopher, religious preacher from the UK, London. And Hamza put him on the spot and asked him, is incest wrong on the naturalistic, atheistic worldview? Naturalistic worldview is the atheistic worldview. And Lawrence Krauss said, no, incest is not wrong. As long as you don't produce children, scientifically, on a natural worldview, is nothing wrong for a sister and a brother to have sex with each other, because they're not doing anybody any harm. So what should be wrong? And that is the problem with subjective morality. Where does it stop? Michael Roos is an English atheistic philosopher. In his book, Darwinism as Religion, Michael said, ethics is illusory. I appreciate that when somebody said, love thy neighbor, which is a Christian dictum, as you know very well, as thyself, they think they are referring above and beyond themselves. Nevertheless, such references are truly without foundation. Morality is just an aid to survival and reproduction, and any deeper meaning is illusory. So our morality, our well-being is the same according to the naturalistic worldview, the atheistic worldview. Our morality is the same as a morality of a dog, or a morality of a cow, or a morality of a bird, because all we are is just gene reproducing machines. Now think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Human exceptionalism is a religious idea. It's not an atheistic idea. It's not a secular idea, because according to the atheist worldview, there's no such thing as human exceptionalism. We are the same as the cats and dogs and apes and chimps. So if human exceptionalism is a religious idea, why does the atheist argue for human rights? Why should we have separate rights? Why should we be special? Why should we have this, that, and the other if we are just mere animals? In the naturalistic worldview, rationality is necessary, but is it sufficient for morality? Necessary conditions and sufficient conditions are philosophical terms. You can have necessary conditions and you have sufficient conditions. In the atheistic worldview, yes, we need rationality and it's necessary to figure out morality, but is it sufficient? And my answer is, my view is no. Dostoevsky, in his book, The Brother Karamazov, one of his characters, Ivan, he said, if God doesn't exist, anything is permitted. William Lane Craig, a famous Christian apologist, one of my favorites, he said, take God out and we are apes with delusion of moral grandeur. This is what my opening statement of. Take God out and morals simply become etiquettes. Divine command theory is another theory as opposed to utilitarianism, which says that God is the source of all morality. The divine command theory solves the problem of grounding. There are atheists in the world, ladies and gentlemen, who believe in objective morality. Majority of the secular, liberal, atheistic, agnostic view is subjective morality, as I've explained in detail. But there are atheists like Sam Harris in his book, The Moral Landscape. He talks about objective morality. The problem is the atheists cannot ground the objective morality. Where is it coming from? Is it coming from your rationality? But we have proven that the rationality vary according to the circumstances. So where do you ground your morality? Now, there is a dilemma called Euthyphro's dilemma, which goes against the divine command theory, and I'll discuss it at the end. It's a little bit philosophical and complicated. I know we are heading toward sort of, I think I've spoken for 50 minutes already. So you've got 10-15 minutes to go, and I don't want to prolong the talk. So the atheists face the problem of grounding. Where does the atheist ground its morality? There's no way to ground it. Ethical naturalism is an attempt to link morality with scientific knowledge. It is the view that ethical terms can be defined or explained using the same natural terms that we use to define mathematics or science. So the atheist, in an attempt to ground his morality, uses science to say that we can get moral values out of science, because there's nowhere else to get the moral values from. Where is the rationality coming from? Is it coming from evolutionary biology? Is it coming from thousands of years of living together? Is it coming from? So hopefully so far I have narrowed it down to 3 grounding situations. Morality coming from Allah, morality coming from God, morality coming from evolutionary biology of living together, and morality coming from science and rationality. The problem with science is the is-ought problem of David Hume. David Hume is a big Scottish philosopher and atheist, and he said that you cannot derive moral values from scientific factual statements. It's called the is-ought fallacy, or Hume's guillotine. You cannot derive these values from factual statements. So it's a fact that a human baby, and it is a fact that a human baby at 5 weeks have got some neurological and ECG changes. It is a fact that a human baby at 24 weeks is like a small human. So if it is a fact that the human baby at 24 weeks of gestation may become a little human, then can we do an abortion at that point, or should we not do an abortion? So from an is to an ought, from a scientific fact to a moral fact. Because the human baby has developed life, fate, sorry, I keep saying the word baby, because the human fetus has developed a life in it. Yasin Saab, are we still here? Am I still clear?
You're absolutely very clear.
Okay.
We're following you.
Good. So because I'm talking to a screen, so I don't know whether there are still people there or not. So if the human baby has developed a life, a fetus has developed a life, should we abort it? Shan't we abort it? If it is a fact that red meat raises your cholesterol, should we or are we ought not to eat red meat? So you cannot derive moral facts from scientific statements. Philosophers for the last 400 years has tried to bridge the is-ought fallacy of David Hume, and they failed miserably, because there's no way you can gap the is-ought problem. Appealing to nature in moral and political arguments cannot bridge the is-ought gap. So moral judgment that is arrived by the way of fact alone is suspect, is skepticism. I'll be expected to say that a moral judgment is derived from a scientific fact. As we have seen, reason alone can never immediately prevent or produce any action by contradicting or approving it. The other problem is the problem of induction. I mean, David Hume was an atheist, but he single-handedly destroyed the atheistic grounding of objective morality. So you know that reasoning is done by two methods. Again, this is logic. I'm not talking about logic. It's inductive reasoning and deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is you do observation. So the sun always rises in the east. Premise one. Conclusion, tomorrow the sun will rise in the east. Deductive reasoning. Socrates was a man. Premise one. Premise two, all men are mortal. Conclusion, Socrates was mortal. That's deductive reasoning. David Hume said that the inductive reasoning used to ground objective morality cannot be used to derive moral fact. It's called the fallacy of induction. Why? Because inductive reasoning can be fallacious. Just because the sun always rises from the east and has been doing that for the last 5,000 or 10,000, 2 million years ago, tomorrow there's no guarantee that the sun will rise from the east. Science is based on inductive reasoning. Science is based on observation. And we have got proofs of that. So from Copernicus to Galileo to Newton to Einstein to now Hawkins and Roger Penrose, science has changed. Inductive reasoning has changed. If we can't drive our morality from inductive reasoning. So this is called the problem of induction. Again, a problem for the atheist deriving morality from objective grounding. So again, so this is G.E. Moore in his book, The Principia Ethica, also said the same thing. He called it the naturalistic fallacy. You can't drive moral values from naturalistic, scientific, rational facts because of the two things that I've said, the Izod fallacy and the problem of induction, which is also called the naturalistic fallacy. Now, the atheist, so the third thing, so we have talked about why we can't use subjective morality or utilitarianism. We have talked about why we can't derive morality from science and induction. The third thing the atheist will say to you, that we have derived our morality from altruism. Altruism means kindness, being good to each other. For the last 5,000 years, we have lived together. We've been kind to each other. This is called altruism or kin selection. So I'm only kind to other people. I'm only good to other people. I'm only moral to other people so that they can be good to me. It's called the tit-tat theory, tit for tat theory. So I'm good to people. I am doing genetic altruism. I'm looking after my children so they can carry my gene. I'm doing a group selected altruism with my family, with my workmates, with my colleagues, with my Al-Mawrid colleagues, so that they can do the same to me. I'm doing reciprocal altruism so that people can do the same to me. That's why I derive my moral values from. The problem with this is, again, another philosophical problem. What about the pure altruism? What about blood donation? When I donate blood, I don't know who's going to get it. Why am I donating blood? When I give charity to the children in Africa or Asia or Europe, I don't know who those children are. I've never seen them. This is pure altruism. This is pure morality. Where this is coming from? The supererogatory acts. Supererogatory means above and beyond the call of duty. The supererogatory acts. I see a child drowning in a canal. I go and dive and I save the child and I die in that process. Where is that coming from? On a naturalistic worldview, atheistic worldview, I can't explain the supererogatory fact because I'm just an animal. My reason for survival is to propagate my genes. I can't explain the supererogatory act. And that is a problem that the atheists feel with the theory of kin selection and altruism. Now, this is a little video I'm going to play. This is Richard Dawkins, and he is talking about altruism. Listen to the video carefully, and then we'll be coming to our last slide.
Mean we should romanticize nature or not face facts when it comes to the genetic roots of altruism. I think altruism has been favored by kin selection in small groups in nature. But when it comes to humans, something special is going on. We've gone beyond kin selection. Our world now has been scaled up. We live amongst large anonymous populations of strangers, not kin who share our genes, and not people who we might expect to return favors. And yet we still have a lust to be nice. The rule that's built into your brain says, be nice to everyone you meet. And that works in nature because everyone you meet is going to be part of the small group. Similarly, everyone you meet is actually probably going to be a cousin. So when I see another human being in distress, weeping or something like that, I have an almost uncontrollable urge to go and console, to maybe them. What's the matter? How can I help? Please let me help you. And that's a strong inner urge, which as a Darwinian, I believe has ancestral roots in a past when I lived in small groups like this, small bands, in which I was likely to be surrounded by kin or surrounded by individuals who could reciprocate. I no longer am. This person who is weeping is a complete stranger to me. They will never reciprocate. And yet the lust is still there. Are humans often so good to complete strangers? Could it be because our selfish genes are in some sense, a blessed sense, misfiring? Compare it to sexual desire. The lust to copulate, even though we deliberately use contraception to thwart its evolutionary purpose, is still there because of hardwiring from the genes. Similarly, we have a lust to be nice, even to total strangers, because niceness has been hardwired into us from the time when we used to live in small groups of close kin and close acquaintances with whom it would pay to reciprocate favors. This, for me, is the antidote to the darkness some have seen in our Darwinian heritage. And it goes further. The joy of being conscious human beings is that we rise above our origins. Our misfiring selfish genes mean we don't ape the nastiness of nature, but extract ourselves from it and live by our values. Mean we should remember.
Yasin Saab, did that video play okay?
Yeah, we got the crux of it. We do have, we got an idea what he was trying to say. It went well.
Okay, fantastic. So basically, Dawkins, as you can probably, he is grappling, he's struggling to explain altruism. He's struggling to explain kin selection. He's saying it's hardwired into our brain. How is it hardwired? If we developed as kin, as groups of people, as Dawkins says in his book, The Selfish Gene, how is it hardwired in our brain? And what do they mean by misfiring genes? He grapples with the idea. He can't explain altruism on this basis. And he has actually publicly admitted that with this debate with Bert Weinstein once, who's an evolutionary biologist as well. Right, I think I'm coming to the end of my talk. I'm sure all of you are pretty fed up by now. So what is the, so now that we have discussed all these theories, what is the epistemological necessity of theism? Now remember, science follows the principle of uniformity of nature. This is called the presupposition argument for existence of God. God believes us to live consistently because the theists believe in God. The university or the uniformity of science is subject to the induction problem and the problem and the is-ought problem. The theists who believe in God, and there are hundreds of studies which will tell you now that people who believe in God in the times of depression, in the times when they need someone, in the times of misery, in the time of sadness, they have much more stronger psychological psyche and psychological background than someone who's got more of a nihilistic attitude, who thinks that the universe is nothing but a pitiless, indifferent place. This is a black swan problem, but I'll skip that. Richard Soinberg, who is another philosopher, in his book, The Coherence of Theism, he's a British philosopher from Oxford, says that theism or religion let us rely on our belief-forming mechanism, the concept of logical coherence. Theistic belief give us belief in the reliability of human mind, that the human mind is reliable. Now, last slide. If none of you have read this book, The Born Believers, I will encourage you to read this book. This is research published by Justin Barrett, who is an anthropologist in Oxford. Justin basically did a big study, £2 million study across 20 countries, thousands of children, and he studies them, and he said that children up to the age of 2 hours can imitate the facial expression from their parents. The children, very young children, seek an intelligent design. He said that by 1 year, children have knowledge of an agent, an agency. Agency means an outside person, like a person, their parents, or God. Children have a hypersensitivity detection system, the human cognitive system for detecting agents. They can detect that there's a supernatural being. They can detect that the design imply and designer. And most surprisingly, this study has revealed that they connect designer to morality. This is what Ghamidi Sahib has always said, and the Farai school has always said in their description of fitra, that a human being is born with an innate sense of morality. This is what a prophet said 1400 years ago. Every child is born with a true faith of Islam, and his parents convert him to Judaism, Christianity, or Magnetism, as an animal delivers a perfect baby animal. Do you find it mutilated? Thank you very much. That was my last slide.
Thank you very much, Dr. Suhail. This was quite a jam-packed lecture with it's sort of a big antioxidant capsule that we have to take, and it's difficult to swallow, but it's nevertheless very fascinating. We do have questions coming up, but Sam, please, if you can go ahead and take the Q&A session.
Yeah, all right. Osman Zahid, please unmute your mic.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I ask in Urdu? अच्छा, तो सर मेरा पहला सवाल आपसे ये था कि आपने सारी ये थोड़ा सा कॉन्टेक्स्ट बताया, हिस्ट्री बताई, तो इसमें आपको क्या लगता है कि कौन सी थ्योरी सबसे ज्यादा करीब है जो इस्लामिक पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू है मोरालिटी का उससे, या आपको लगता है कि कोई भी करीब नहीं है और इस्लाम की कोई अपनी एक फिलोसॉफिकल ग्राउंडिंग है जो मोरालिटी वो पेश करना चाह रहा है?
मेरा जाती ख्याल ये है कि इस्लाम की जो मोरालिटी है is a combination of some of the morality, कुछ ये जो morality की views जो हमने discuss की हैं, इस्लाम की जो morality है उसमें इसकी combination है. For example, virtue theory, जो Aristotelian theory मैंने आपके सामने जो पेश की, virtue ethics. इस्लाम हमेशा virtue की बात करता है. इस्लाम हमें सिखाता है कि हमने कि generosity सिखाता है. इस्लाम हमें रहम करना सिखाता है. इस्लाम हमें अच्छा पेरेंट, अच्छा चाइल्ड, अच्छा हस्बैंड बनने की तकलीद करता है. तो इस्लाम की जो मोरालिटी है वो वर्च्यू एथिक्स और इंस्टिंक्चुअल मोरालिटी है. इस्लाम इस बात पे बिलीव करता है कि हमें अल्लाह ताला ने खैर और शर की फितरत के साथ इस दुनिया में पैदा किया. इस्लाम इस बात में बिलीव करता है कि खैर शर की ये फितरत हमारे अंदर वदियत की गई, और फिर अल्लाह ताला जो है वो पैगंबरों को इस दुनिया में पैगंबरों को भेजता है ताकि हमें याद दिलाएं कि खैर और शर की फितरत जो हमारे अंदर वदियत की गई है, हमें उसकी याद दहानी कराएं, हम उस बात को सुने और फिर उस बात को सुन के अपनी जो हमारे अंदर फितरत है, या हमारा जो नफ्स है, या हमारा जो कल्ब है, उसकी हम फिर उसकी जो है हम उसको रेक्टिफाई करें, उसको ठीक करें और इस्लामिक जो है फॉलोइंग उनको फॉलो करें. तो मेरा इन समरी मेरा ये जवाब ये है कि इस्लामिक फिलॉसफी इज अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ फ्यू ऑफ दीज फिलॉसफी जो मैंने आपको पेश की. Hope that answers the
सर
question.
इसमें हाँ जी जी इसमें एक और चीज कि जिस तरह हमें अब ये देखने में आ रहा है बहुत ज्यादा ये जो इंटेलेक्चुअल स्फीयर है उसके अंदर कि मोरालिटी को लेके एक तरह से आप क्या लें एवोल्यूशनरी और एक प्रैग्मेटिक टाइप डोमेन में बहुत ज्यादा जॉर्डन पीटरसन भी बातें करता है। उसके अलावा भी सैम हैरिस की बुक भी इसी तरह उस पर बेस पे आती है कि हम ये देखें कि एवोल्यूशन ने हमें किस तरह हमें शेप किया है, हमारा एवोल्यूशनरी प्रोसेस क्या था, और उस इससे फिर हम किसी तरह अपने ऑट को निकालने की कोशिश करें। तो मैं जब इस बारे में थोड़ा सा सोचता हूँ तो आपको क्या लगता है, जिस तरह अभी आपने बात की डिवाइन कमांड थ्योरी है उसकी और जो करेक्टर वाली थ्योरी है, मुझे ये लगा आपकी बात से कि आप ये कहना चाह रहे हैं कि डिवाइन कमांड थ्योरी बेसिकली जो कि कुरान पाक में कमांडमेंट्स हैं उनको आप ले लें, और उसको अगर आप मिक्स करें जो हमारी करेक्टर वाली थ्योरी है एरिस्टोटल की, तो फिर एक तरह से एक हमें मेरे ख्याल है वो व्यू सा मिलता है इस्लामिक उसका फिलॉसफी का कि मोरालिटी का। तो मैं जब इसको देखता हूँ मुझे ये लगता है कि अगर हम इन दोनों थ्योरीज को या इस तरह की मिलती जुलती थ्योरीज को जिनसे ऑब्वियसली आपकी जो मोरालिटी है वो एक बड़ी ही एब्सोल्यूट उसको एक ठोस ग्राउंडिंग मिल जाती है, क्योंकि कमांडमेंट्स जो है वो स्क्रिप्चर में लिखी हुई है, कैरेक्टर आपने अपना अच्छा करना है, तो वो एक तरह से क्या आप कह सकते हैं ऑब्जेक्टिविटी का जो एक फीलिंग है वो तो बड़ी स्ट्रांग पैदा हो जाती है आपके अंदर। लेकिन उससे मुझे लगता है कि हमारी शायद वो जो डिस्कशंस जो कि इस तरह की डिस्कशंस है मोरालिटी के ऊपर जो साइंस बेस्ड हैं जो एवोल्यूशन बेस्ड हैं, वो सोसाइटी में जो है ना उस तरफ ध्यान जाना कम हो जाएगा, क्योंकि हमारा जो मोरालिटी का मुझे लगता है जो बेसिक इंस्टिंक्ट है वो ये है कि हम अपने कैरेक्टर से अपने ज़मीर से राजी हों, और प्लस अगर हमें ये लगता है कि हम सोसाइटी के लिए अच्छा कर रहे हैं, ये दो चीजें अगर हम फुलफिल कर रहे हैं, अपने ज़मीर से राजी हैं और हमें ये लगता है कि हम सोसाइटी के लिए अच्छा कर रहे हैं, तो देन कोई बहुत बड़ी कोई अर्जेंसी पैदा नहीं होगी कि हम मोरालिटी को डिफरेंट बेसिस पे उस पे डिफरेंट यानी उस पे बात करने की जरूरत पड़े। मुझे लगता है कि फिर हम वो क्यों करेंगे, और ये यूरोप में भी ये सब जो रिसर्चेज हैं वो इसीलिए हो रही हैं क्योंकि उन्होंने अपनी पहले बेस खो दिए, अब वो डिफरेंट जगह मतलब कि एक तरह से अब पहले हाथ मार रहे हैं। तो वो जो डिफरेंट डिस्कशंस हैं जो कि अब पता नहीं आपकी व्यू में वो फ्रूटफुल हैं कि नहीं है, लेकिन उनका दरवाजा एक तरह से बंद होता है फिर नजर आता है कि अगर हम इन दोनों थ्योरीज में को मान लें हम, क्योंकि फिर वो नहीं रहती हमारे अंदर एक तरह से अर्जेंसी की फीलिंग नहीं रहती कि भाई हम सेटिस्फाई हो जाते हैं, क्योंकि बड़ी एक ऑब्जेक्टिव सी हमारे अंदर फीलिंग आ जाती है कि ये हमारे पास थ्योरी आ गई है, हमारे पास ये मोरालिटी आ गई है, हम इखलाक में सही हो गए। तो इस बारे में आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे कि ये एक
जी जी बिल्कुल, मैं बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट आपने रेस किया, मैं एग्री करता हूँ आपकी अक्सर जो मेजॉरिटी ऑफ जो बातें आपने की हैं मैं उससे एग्री करता हूँ। मेडिएवल क्रिश्चियनिटी के अंदर प्रॉब्लम सारी ये पैदा हुई थी कि क्रिश्चियनिटी जो है मिडिल एजेस में 1200 से 1500 तक कैथोलिक चर्च वाज अ वेरी वेरी स्ट्रिक्ट चर्च। कैथोलिक चर्च इतना स्ट्रिक्ट चर्च था कि उसने जो स्पेनिश इंक्विजिशन थी और यूरोपियन इंक्विजिशन थी, they came down very hard on the Christian people. तो एक एवर्जन जो है, एक डिससेटिस्फैक्शन यूरोप के अंदर पैदा हो गई थी क्रिश्चियनिटी की तरफ, और उसकी वजह से फिर ये हुआ कि जो एनलाइटनमेंट फिलोसफर जो पैदा हुए उन्होंने गॉड को डेड डिक्लेयर कर दिया। जैसे नीचा है, नीचा के जो फेमस वर्ड्स हैं, गॉड इज डेड वी हैव किल्ड हिम। इसी तरह से जो फिलोसफर फिर नीचा के बाद जो पैदा हुए, फ्रेडरिक नीचा के बाद जो फिलोसफर पैदा हुए, कार्ल मार्क्स और इंगल्स और इन लोग इन्होंने रिलीजन को सोसाइटी का ओपियम, कार्ल मार्क्स ने फेमसली कहा कि रिलीजन इज अ ओपियम फॉर द सोसाइटी, क्योंकि इतनी जो कैथोलिक चर्च की वजह से इतनी एवर्जन पैदा हो गई थी सोसाइटी में कि सोसाइटी में गैप पैदा हो गया। तो एनलाइटमेंट जो फिलोसफर फिर आए हैं जैसे कांट हो गया और उसके बाद जो फिलोसफर आए हैं, उनके पास फिर और कोई चारा नहीं था कि मोरालिटी को रैशनैलिटी से डिफाइन करें, क्योंकि रिलीजन के खिलाफ बहुत बड़ा मोमेंटम खड़ा हो गया। और आपने बिल्कुल ठीक कहा, फिर मोरालिटी की मुख्तलिफ फिर बेसिस ढूंढी जाती हैं। और मगर सारा बेसिक पॉइंट ये है कि अगर आप डिवाइन कमांड थ्योरी को, अगर आप अल्लाह में बिलीव नहीं करते और गॉड में बिलीव नहीं करते, चाहे वो क्रिश्चियन गॉड हो या ज्यूइश गॉड हो या मुस्लिम गॉड हो, आप उसमें बिलीव नहीं करते तो आपकी मोरालिटी फिर कोलैप्स हो जाएगी। तो दैट इज आई थिंक द बेसिक थिंग, यू हैव टू हैव बिलीव इन द सुपरनैचुरल बीइंग टू हैव अ ग्राउंडिंग फॉर योर मोरालिटी। Thank you.
थैंक यू सर।
All right, next we have a question from iPhone.
Hello, Can you
Hello.
hear me? Yeah,
Yes, I
so,
can. Yeah.
all right.
Assalamu
I would like to ask this question. I have almost all the countries that are in the top peaceful countries in Global Peace Index are atheist countries, or predominantly secular countries. Iceland, New Zealand, Denmark, Switzerland, Ireland, all of them are. And at the bottom, the most violent countries are the Muslim countries: Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Yemen. So my question is, you know, your whole video was about how, you know, religious, secular people don't have a based morality, that they don't have this kind of philosophy that, you know, guides them. But according to the facts, according to the you know, the evidence that we see with our eyes, we can see that the countries that are doing the most violence are the religious countries. So that's my question.
Yeah, this is a very good question. Very commonly asked question, obviously, because on the surface of it, you see countries who practice secular philosophies. On the surface of it, who practice utilitarian philosophies are successful societies, whereas
Yeah.
the so-called religious societies are the backward, violent societies. So I just have to say two things to that, or I'll say two things to that. So basically, there is a difference between application of laws, and there's a difference between understanding of the laws. So my talk was about the understanding or the ontology of the laws. So my talk today was what we call the ontological talk, which means the study of a concept. So this is about morality, but not the application of morality. The application of morality is what will actually make, it is what will actually make you see the result of what you're doing and what you're not doing. So Pakistan is a Muslim country, predominantly Muslim country. I'm from Pakistan. If you look at the application of morality in Pakistan, for example, how the moral values are applied on a ground level, you will see that it is quite a corrupt society. And obviously, because it is a corrupt society, you see violence, you see poverty, you see people being punished, you see people being penalized. But that is because there's a problem with the application of the moral laws. So that is my first point. My second point is, you've mentioned the indices. You have mentioned a particular index of pitching one country against another country. Now, there are different kind of indices. In preparation for this talk, I looked at the depression index for various countries in the world, differentiating between secular and religious society. And you will see that the depression rates, and I'm purely talking about apathy and depression rates, are pretty high in civilized societies as well. If you look at the depression indices, you will see many of the European countries are actually, or American countries, or American states are quite high in the depression index. So those are the only 2 points that I'll say. But yes, I take your point. The problem of application is an important point.
Right. Thank you for your response. I just like to say this. Yeah, on your second point, you were talking about how, you know, there were that depression rates were high in the more secular states. But honestly, that's frivolity, because at least there's there's a less amount of crime going on. Like, I'd rather live in a country where I'm depressed than a country where I'm worried about my security all the time. And on your first point, when it comes to the application of morality, is very different. So would you be willing to say this? If to take any country that has adopted Islamic laws, do you think that if there was, you would say as a fact that if there was application of those laws in those countries, they would be more peaceful and they would be a much better place to live than a place like Iceland or Switzerland? There are socialist countries.
So what I would say to that is, the world at the moment is a global village. So I can look at my own country. Let's say I'm living in Iceland or Norway or Sweden, very peaceful countries. I'm living in that country. But
Yeah.
if I am practicing a utilitarian principle, the greatest good for the greatest number of people, that doesn't, the ricochet of my ethical philosophy doesn't just stop at my boundary. It goes beyond my boundary of my own country. So if I'm living in the United States in a very peaceful manner, my actions that I'm taking in my own country to provide peace and prosperity to my own citizens has got an effect, has got a global effect on the global village. And that need to be considered as well. So for example, if I decide to provide security and to reduce terrorism.
I'm sorry to interject, Dr. Suhail. We are unable to hear.
Yeah, can
There's
you
some
hear me?
internet.
Now?
You keep breaking up.
Oh, sorry, I think it's the internet problem.
Now you're good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic. So sorry, I'll quickly get to my point. So a utilitarian ethical philosophy will then affect a country that you go and decide to bomb because you don't your country. So that is also a part of the application. Before you
make your argument, I'd like to say this: the countries I mentioned were European countries that have not bombed any of the Islamic countries. I haven't talked about America. America is actually kind of in the middle in this list. I'm just talking about these European countries who are just, they're just genuinely like safe havens. They've made, I'm not talking about America. Yeah, I know America has its faults and its kind of excess of luxury. But these countries, they're people are making reasonable incomes. There's good family life in these countries, and they haven't based their family models on religion, on Islam or Christianity. They're secular.
Yeah, and I'll agree with you. Now, again, the application of principle of morality are at their height in some of these countries currently that you have mentioned. Now, whether they are coming from objective or subjective morality is, so this is the first point, it's a different debate. But actually, if you look at the application of principle of morality, but then again, I will revert to my original point. If you look at the history of European colonization and European imperialism, you will find out that the current day Europe is actually built on an imperialistic and colonization history. So that fact cannot be ignored just on the present circumstances.
Right. I agree. I agree that Europe was built off of its past transgressions, but so has every country. Like from if you go to the Middle East where Islam was, the Arab Empire was forged through the sword. The Christian empires in Europe were also forged through the sword. So I think almost China also as a country, there were empires that waged war with each other. So I think every country has a very bloody past, but the point is to focus on the future. And I've seen that. I think that the secular countries have done very well, and the religious countries have have stayed in the past.
That is an unfortunate truth that I can't deny, but obviously it once again goes back to the application of what we have discussed today, as opposed to the actually.
But isn't the application there? The application is there in these European countries that with secular laws that are not influenced by any religions. They've created better places, and the application in the Islamic countries not good. Now, maybe are you trying to say that the principles that I should maybe commemorate the principles established in these Islamic countries, that like if the people really truly abided by the principles in these Islamic countries, there would be they would be a much better place to live in? Is that what you're saying?
So what I would say to that argument is, I'll use what Jordan Peterson normally says. Secularism, or let's call it a godless society, has not been around for a long time. Secularism has been around, what, 500 years now?
Yeah.
Before that 500 years, we have a 4,000 years history of religious morals. Now, when a secular talk about morality, what the secular forget to mention, obviously not conveniently, I would say, this is not facetious argument, what the secular would forget to say is the morality has got a 4,000 basis coming religious morality. So those morals have been ingrained into us on a religious ground. Like one of my slides actually said that if the secular morality says that, there is no humanistic views, why are seculars so concerned about humanistic angle? If the secular believe, if the atheists believe that we are byproducts of evolution, then why is it that we are so concerned about humanism? And that's the problem, that the secular forget quite often, that the more ingrained morality in the secular is come from long history, thousands of years of moral grounding that the religion has provided. Now, there are some modern literature.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
so I'll give you one quick example. If you read, there's a book called by Abigail Schreier on
Dr. Suhail.
Now, Abigail.
Dr. Anwar,
Hello.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You got cut off for a bit, so we lost like the last 10, 15 seconds.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, so you probably got up to the point where I was talking about the transgender issue. So the issue comes from the freedom. There are certain states in America where a 15-year-old girl can turn up to a surgical clinic. She is allowed to. Secular freedom and a secular society is beginning to have some moral issues that will highlight in the next 100, 200 years. At the moment, in my opinion, a secular society is enjoying the fruits of the moral seed that's been placed in them from the last 4,000 years of religious indoctrination.
All right. Yeah, I agree. A little bit of what you said, but religion has also been responsible for a lot of the bad that's been done in history too, like the Crusades in Europe. How there are scientists who came up with discoveries, secular scientists that came up with discoveries, and they were burned to death for coming up with those discoveries because those discoveries bypassed the.
My apologies, my dear friend. Very sincere apologies. We have other people in line, and we can continue this later on.
Yeah, we can continue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for.
All right, so next we have a question from Imran Babar.
जी, अस्सलाम वालेकुम डॉक्टर साहब।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम इमरान साहब।
जनाब बहुत अच्छा लेक्चर आज का, बहुत ही हमने एंजॉय किया। सर मेरा और आपने बड़ी तफसील के साथ, और स्पेशली आई लाइक द वे यू डिस्क्राइब द हिस्ट्री ऑफ मोरालिटी. One question that always come to my mind, especially on the secular side, how do they define the evolution in morality? For example, कुछ अर्सा पहले तक, if you look at US or European society. So lesbians and gays were frowned upon. Now, if you look at, so they are celebrated. तो इसी तरह से incest जो है, based on the same, incest today is frowned upon. And then maybe a few years later, that is also acceptable. So how do they define this evolution in their moral values?
जी हाँ, बहुत अच्छा सवाल है इमरान साहब आपका. और जो पिछले हमारे स्पीकर थे, इनका जो लास्ट सवाल था, his last question was actually kind of highlighting, I was trying to highlight that issue as well, और वहीं से मैं continue करूँगा. Secular society की जो main ethos है वो है freedom. Freedom of the person to act as long as you're not harming anyone. ये utilitarian society का एक बुनियादी ethos है. अब अनलिमिटेड फ्रीडम के साथ प्रॉब्लम ये होती है, जैसा कि मैंने बताया, 15 साल की बच्ची है, she goes into a clinic and she says I'm a man trapped in a female body, she can have her breast removed. Same concept is applicable to LGBTQ, and I think it's called LGBTQ plus now or something like that. And also you can, जैसा कि आपने कहा, you can make the proposition that if incest, two people involved in incest are not harming anybody, then what is the problem with incest? And I've given you example, both Lawrence Krauss and Richard Dawkins said in one of their debates that scientifically, on a naturalistic worldview, incest में कोई खराबी नहीं. तो बहुत अच्छा आपने point highlight किया कि free secular society freedom पे base होती है. जो religious societies होती हैं उसमें कुछ prohibitions होती हैं जो moral law से derive होती हैं, जो कि आपको आपका religion या आपका God आपको बताता है. तो ये थोड़ा सा इनके दरमियान एक डिफरेंस होता है.
लेकिन डॉक्टर साहब उसके अंदर वो एवोल्यूशन को कैसे डिफाइन करते हैं कि एट वन गिवन पॉइंट इन टाइम द सेक्युलर सोसाइटी सेज लाइक टुडे दे से दैट incest is wrong, yeah, we generally it is frowned upon. So how do they derive that let's say, and we can track back to the LGBTQ plus a few hundred years ago, so how do they define that evolution?
I think if you mean evolution in terms of social evolution, cultural evolution, then I think it's based on freedom. I don't think they can define it any other way rather than saying that if it is doing the greatest good to the greatest number of people. या जैसे Sam Harris कहता है, anything that increase the pleasure and reduce the pain is justified. It's a moral value, it's goodness. You know, मैंने जो कुछ slides आपको जो मैंने कही थी पेश की थी, उसमें एक philosopher है G.E. Moore, and G.E. Moore कहता है कि goodness का pleasure से कोई ताल्लुक नहीं है. Goodness is a moral value in itself. It's got nothing to do with pleasure. Like in secular society would say that pleasure or anything that maximizes pleasure is linked to goodness. So I think that is the basis they justify it on. That's what my understanding is.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a question from Abdullah.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम. हेलो, अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
वालेकुम.
जी डॉक्टर साहब, मेरा सवाल ये था कि जो आपने ये जो क्लिप चलाया था डॉकिंस का, इसमें जो इसने कहा कि जो हार्ड वायरिंग का बताया और मिस फायरिंग जीन्स का बताया, तो एज अ डॉक्टर और साइंटिस्ट आप इसको कैसे कहते हैं कि ये सही बात नहीं है कि हार्ड वायर नहीं हो सकता? इसके चांस तो क्योंकि है ना, किस तरह अगर उसमें थी तो उसकी हार्ड वायरिंग जो है हम पे भी असर कर या अभी तक उसकी वही मिसफायर कर रही है, तो ये किस तरह साइंटिफिकली रॉन्ग है?
एवोल्यूशनरी बायोलॉजी वाइज कि ये किस तरह हमारे ब्रेन में हार्ड वायर है, मेरे पास इसकी कोई बायोलॉजिकल बेसिस तो नहीं है. आई एम नॉट सेइंग दैट इट इज नॉट आउट देयर. Maybe there is some biological basis of this hard wiring that I'm not aware of. लेकिन मेरा पॉइंट उस क्लिप का ये था कि हम अल्ट्रुइज्म को या किन सिलेक्शन को कैसे एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं. अगर हमारा मकसद सिर्फ अपनी जीन्स को फैलाना है तो हाउ कैन वी एक्सप्लेन अल्ट्रुइज्म? کہ ہم اور جو ریسیپروکل آلچرزم ہے, جو ٹٹ فور ٹیٹ تھیوری ہے کہ آپ اپنی فیملی کے ممبرس کو سپورٹ کر رہے ہیں, اس کو تو ہم سپورٹ کر سکتے ہیں, لیکن وی کانٹ سے کہ اگر میں افریقہ میں کسی کو بلڈ دے رہا ہوں تو ہاؤ از دیٹ پروڈکٹیو ٹو مائی اون جین اسپریڈنگ. تو یہ اس کلپ کا یہ موضوع تھا. I think that's the best answer I can give you.
صحیح. اچھا, اس کے ضمنی ایک سوال ایک تھا میرے ذہن میں کہ یہ جو سوال کیا جاتا ہے کہ کائنات جس طرح کہا جاتا ہے کہ ایکسپینڈنگ ہے اور اس کو یہ لمیٹڈ نہیں ہے, تو یہ کائنات جو کہتے ہیں خود نیچر از گاڈ, تو یہ کیا واقعی میں اس طرح ہے کہ لمیٹڈ نہیں ہے, کائنات ایکسپینڈ کر رہی ہے؟
جی ہاں, جو نیو کاسمولوجیکل تھیوریز ہیں وہ تو یہی کہتی ہیں کہ دنیا ایکسپینڈ کر رہی ہے, جسے سنگولیرٹی.
Dr. Anwar? Dr. Anwar, I think he's having internet issues, so he's stuck again. Dr. Anwar?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you. Can you please repeat the last bit?
Yes, sorry. No,
Thank you.
the current, میں یہ کہہ رہا تھا کہ جو کرنٹ کاسمولوجی تھیوری ہے, سنگولیرٹی تھیورم, جو کہ ہاکنگز نے راجر پینروز کے ساتھ مل کے بنایا تھا, کہ the universe is actually expanding. The universe is expanding in all directions. اور اب یہ ملٹیورس تھیوری کی بھی بات کر رہے ہیں کہ ملٹیورس تھیوری جو ہے, they are different universes and the different universes are expanding all the time. So yes, this is a scientific fact کہ the world is expanding all the time.
تو اس سے یہ نتیجہ کیا برآمد کرنا درست ہے کہ جو ہے اس کی کوئی حد نہیں ہے, تو خدا کی بھی حد نہیں ہوتی, اسی طرح تو اس کو خدا کی طرح مان لیا جائے نیچر کو ہی؟
یہ میرے لیے کہنا بہت مشکل ہے. I think that different concept. خدا کا کانسیپٹ میٹافزیکل کانسیپٹ ہے, اور جو تھیوری میں نے اور آپ نے ڈسکس کی ہے, it's a hard cosmological فزیکل تھیوری. تو دونوں کانسیپٹ کو آپس میں کنفلیٹ کرنا میرے لیے تھوڑا مشکل ہوگا.
جی درست, جزاک اللہ.
Okay, so we have a question from the chat.
Thanks. So the question that we got in chat asks, secular morality does not equate with the absence of God. Rather than the Quran tells us that we have morality, a information of minimal counterintuitiveness, which is recent, even before the discovery of secular morality. That is intriguing that Quran informs us before we researched it or discovered it. He tells us that we knew not before. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. This is quite fascinating. This new research from Justin Barrett is absolutely fascinating, in which he has said that children are born with the concept of agency, a supernatural agency, and they are born with the instinct of morality. So yes, this is very fascinating research.
Thank you, Dr. Suhail.
All right, we have, sorry.
Go ahead.
We have a question from Adil Qureshi.
جی السلام علیکم ڈاکٹر صاحب.
Thank you. السلام علیکم.
اچھا ڈاکٹر صاحب, اگر میں یہ آرگیو کروں کہ ایک مسلمان کی حیثیت سے morality کے بارے میں جو میری سوچ ہے وہ کمپلیٹلی پیورلی ریشنل ہے, کیونکہ اس کے اندر جو آئی تھنک جو چیز پرابلی ہم نے ڈسکس نہیں کی ہے وہ ہے بیسکلی دا بلیف ان دا ڈے آف ججمنٹ, رائٹ. میرے تمام کے تمام ایکشنز جو ہیں میں ان کو صحیح اس لیے کروں گا کیونکہ ان سب کے کانسیکوینسز ہونے ہیں. ان کے کانسیکوینسز جو ہیں وہ ڈیلیڈ ہیں, وہ اس وقت تو مجھے نظر نہیں آ رہے, لیکن اگر میں یہاں پر کوئی اچھا کام کرتا ہوں تو مجھے اس کا جو جزا ہے وہ بیسکلی آفٹر لائف میں یا ڈے آف ججمنٹ میں مل جانی ہے. سو ٹیکنیکلی مائی بلیف ان ڈے آف ججمنٹ, وچ از بیسکلی مائی بلیف ان گاڈ, forces me to do something that is completely rational and it is purely in my own self interest. میرے اپنے سیلف انٹرسٹ میں ہے کہ میں اچھا کام کروں, اور میرے اپنے سیلف انٹرسٹ میں نہیں ہے کہ میں برا کام کروں. تو یہ جو چیز ہے یہ ایک طرح سے ان دو ڈفرینٹ چیزوں کو انٹرسیکٹ نہیں کر دیتی ہے, जहाँ पर एक तरफ आप मोरालिटी को अल्लाह से लिंक करते हैं और एक तरफ मोरालिटी को सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट से। मेरे नज़दीक तो एक ही चीज़ है, मेरा अपना सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट भी इसी में है कि अल्लाह मुझसे राजी हो, और अल्लाह पे बिलीफ भी मेरे सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट को ही प्रमोट कर रही है।
जी हाँ, बहुत अच्छा, सुपर क्वेश्चन कि जो हम दुनिया में जो काम कर रहे हैं वो सिर्फ सजा और जजा के लिए कर रहे हैं जो हमें क़यामत में मिलनी है। तो ये क्वेश्चन और ये हमारी मोरालिटी को किस तरह से अफेक्ट करता है, ये एसेंशियली आपका क्वेश्चन है। तो मेरे पास इसका कोई बहुत, इट्स अ फिलोसॉफिकल वेरी गुड क्वेश्चन। आई डोंट हैव अ कंक्लूसिव आंसर टू दैट। The only I've thought about this issue as well, and the only thing that I would say कि दुनिया में and I agree with the Farai school of thought here, दुनिया में हमें इम्तिहान के लिए पैदा किया गया है, और दुनिया में हमें जो इम्तिहान के लिए भेजा गया, हमें एक फ्री विल दी गई। तो जब हमें फ्री विल वो दी गई है, तो वो फ्री विल हमें गलत कामों को करने में हमारे लिए एक आजमाइश है। फ्री विल टेल अस डोंट डू दिस, डोंट डू दैट, दिस इज गुड फॉर यू, डू दिस इज नॉट गुड फॉर यू। तो ये हमारे लिए दुनिया में एक बहुत बड़ा इम्तिहान है जो हमारी मॉरल वैल्यूज को एक ठीक रास्ते पे रखता है। एंड टू मी दिस इज वेयर आवर मोरालिटी इज टेस्टेड इन दिस वर्ल्ड बिकॉज ऑफ आवर फ्री विल। अगर हमारी फ्री विल ना होती और हमें एक बता दिया गया होता कि आपका जो टारगेट है, इवेंचुअल टारगेट, वो जन्नत या जहन्नम में जाना है, तो लाइफ वुड बीन मच ईजियर। लेकिन चूंकि हमें फ्री विल से बेस्टो कर दिया गया है, तो इसलिए इट्स डिफिकल्ट फॉर अस टू फॉलो और नॉट फॉलो मोरालिटी, और यही हमारा इम्तिहान। तो ऑन टॉप ऑफ आर जो हमारा हदफ है, जन्नत और जहन्नुम को पाने का जो हमारा हदफ है, उसके अलावा जिस हमें इम्तिहान में डाला गया है, वो हमारी फ्री विल की वजह से, जो कि हमारी मोरालिटी को इस दुनिया में टेस्ट करता है। और मेरा ख्याल में रिलीजियस मोरालिटी का इस दुनिया में ये एक बहुत बड़ा जो सारी सिचुएशन है, जो बहुत बड़ा इम्तिहान है, इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ दैट, नॉट बिकॉज के वेल, इट इज बिकॉज के हमारा इवेंचुअल हदफ भी वही है, लेकिन उसके अलावा हमारा एक और भी हदफ है कि अपनी फ्री विल के ऊपर काबू करके अपनी मोरालिटी को रिलीजियस लाइंस पे रखें। ये मेरा व्यू है इसके बारे में। आई होप इट, थैंक यू।
Sure.
All right, we have a question from Muhammad Ali.
Assalamu alaikum, Suhail. Excellent talk. Enjoyed it. I missed the first bit of it, so a little bit out of context, but few comments. They're comments, they're not actually questions. मेरी observation ये है कि most of your audience are from Muslim background. That's what I pick it up. Sometimes when we listen to objective conversations, we come with a certain mindset, and the conversation centers around our beliefs and seeing and rationalizing and fitting in what fits in with the religion script. And sometimes, while that is one way of looking at it, I think tragically it misses out to have objectivity in terms of getting all views possible. Sometimes if we can park our religion to one side, our own views or the values we've been brought up with, and objectively listen at all kind of views on that people have, and then pick on what really works automatically. I think that's how I have felt it really useful, that it comes back to your religion as well in a much more objective, stronger way. तो अगर conversations में हम लोग ऐसा कर सकेंगे, religion को थोड़ा सा side में रख के बात कर सकें, तो probably we'll get more out of your talk. So this is just a suggestion, a comment. Sometimes what we are looking for is validation. तो हम लोग बहुत सारी चीजों उसमें miss कर देते हैं. Second comment, I wanted to say something. We had an excellent, one of our friend who was asking questions about different societies. Again, I don't think the talk is about religious societies, and just secular countries, and they are not forcing religion upon yourself, yet they are not restricting religion like some of the other concepts were. And probably that's one of the reasons that they've done so well. तो उसमें religion को उन्होंने force नहीं किया आपके ऊपर, you're not forced to like some of the religious societies जो हमारी हैं. So I think we need to understand the concept that which kind of societies have done so well. There are multiple reasons, but part of it is that they are more tolerant, they are more acceptable, and they let you be yourself. And that has what has helped. If you let people grow objectively, people will come towards the truth as long as they're seeking it. And I think it's our own insecurities that we have to always hide behind religion so that we can slap a conversation shut. So religion ko agar hum side mein rakh ke baat kar le, probably we'll get more out of it, but that's only my view, not wanting to cause any offense. The talk's brilliant, and I think it's going at a very good level, so carry on. That's all there is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had some very good points, especially jo aapka second point hai. It's very good that when we talk about secular societies doing well, we are talking secular as a whole society. We don't know how many of the people in that secular society are actually following religion. For example, in the United States of America, a recent poll has shown that majority of the people believe in God. Majority of the people, in certain states in the middle belt, for example, lots of people are actually of a religious predisposition. So बहुत अच्छा point आपने कहा कि as long as it's not forced on people, and यही फराई स्कूल का भी यही thought, यही view है. अगर आप गांधी साहब की talk सुने तो गांधी साहब भी यही कहते हैं कि state can be religious, but you don't force your views on people. Let people give the people the message of peace and religion, but let them do what they want to do in terms of freedom. कुछ certain चीजें होंगी जो state के level पे legislate होंगी, लेकिन you cannot force your religious views on people. So the very good points, and thank you for mentioning that. I appreciate it.
We have another question from the chat.
Okay. So the chat question asks, if morality is secular and learned as a survival kit, then why do we have both good and evil? The one that is detrimental to survival should have been lost like fins or the gills, coming from an evolutionary perspective.
So basically, again, we are conflating two issues here. We are conflating the biology with the moral values. So this is again the is or dilemma. So we are conflating a scientific fact with a moral value. Moral values are abstract. You can't derive moral values from evolutionary biology. So fins or gills, of course, you lost them as an evolutionary advantage when we came from the water land mainly to dry land. We become bipedal, quadrupedal, and then bipedal. So we lost our fins and gills. But that's an evolutionary biological fact. That's not as such a moral fact. So there's a little bit of a difference between the two.
So essentially, what you're saying is that we can't confuse with morality in terms of our biology, and how biology evolved is not necessarily how morality would have evolved.
Not necessarily. That's a very good word. Yes, they do affect each other, but not necessarily. It's a sufficient condition, but is it actually a necessary condition? It's not.
Thank you very much.
We have a question from Ali Rasul.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Assalamu alaikum. Ji haan, bilkul.
First of all, Dr. Anwar, thank you for this talk. I barely passed philosophy 101, so this was such a refresher after a long time. My question is, and I may have misunderstood, but I agree with your conclusion. However, I see an issue that when you go with this view and say ethics and morality comes from God's instructions, then its application depends on a personal interpretation of the divine words. And as you know, they can be misinterpreted and in turn misconstrue the application. Hence, we see the religious fundamentalists and its application of their version of morality, right? So my question is, how do we fix this problem? Do you think we should have a hybrid understanding of morality and ethics, being an in-between product coming from Allah and also yourself as a human being? Or have a more humanistic approach also? Because otherwise, what's right? If I say, killing non-Muslims is okay because they don't believe or they do shirk or whatever, then we have people like ISIS and on the fundamentalists, right? They're using the same interpretation. Their morality is coming from Quran directly, according to them.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very valid point and a very good question. Is the interpretation, once again, goes back to the question of the previous caller. is that we fix the interpretation by continuous research, continuous dialogue, learning to listen to each other, learning to criticize each other without getting angry at each other, developing tolerance, like Ahad said, we have to be tolerant of the other religious views. That's the only way to fix it, by a continuous process of dialogue. If we just stick to our own morality basis, our own dictum, then our application could be wrong. And that is what has caused problems. I mean, look at how many sects we have in Islam. We have hundreds of sects just in Islam because of the precise thing that you said, which is the different understanding of the same scripture. Obviously, the instinctual or intuitive morality that I talked about is different to the understanding. We are born with that. But we need scripture, we need prophets to explain that. And that's where the differences appeared. And the simple answer is it cannot be fixed without dialogue. It cannot be fixed without tolerance.
Okay. So okay, another small question. I'm not going to take too much time. So you're saying that freedom is okay, even in our religion, right? But freedom also comes with some caveats, right? Allah will make certain things halal versus haram, right? Because if you leave everything on freedom, then you run into issues like the previous caller, one of them guys were saying that, gays and lesbians were frowned upon earlier, but now they're okay. So the society, because of the freedom, they can enact anything or make anything, as they develop. So there has to be something that has to be set as a standard that is across the generation, so that way we have freedom, but within certain boundaries. So you think we have to abide by the boundaries?
I think most religions would give, Islam, for example, Islam is very family and society centered. So the main values of virtues in Islam would be to comply and look after and be obliged to fulfill the duties of your family members and your immediate society. And that cannot come without some form of restrictions. So just like an organization that, for example, an organization that's very profitable, and a good working disciplined organization would have some boundaries or some rules. Similarly, religions, that's where the basic ethos of the religion is. They will talk about some boundaries and some rules. And without rules and without boundaries, it would be difficult to fulfill the share of people around you. Because if we all follow egoistic morality, for example, that what is good for us should be allowed, then we'll run into serious problems. So I think boundaries, some form of boundaries should be there.
Thank you, Sean. So the Discord link is in the chat, and thanks for coming, everyone.